1 2 1 2. All right. Well, at least some things are working smoothly here. Now, what to go on? Read about Wikipedia's article entries. What is there today? What to know about and stuff. Like the Battle of Delfell was fought over 3 days in July 3731 in and near the, how do you pronounce this, Takatakara Cha Pass in modern Uzbekistan, between the large army of the Umayyad Caliphate and forces of Turkish Khaganate. There's also, did you know that Enrique de Lorquitas picture, who was the first Mexican woman to appear as singing in Wagner's Der Wackler, became an award-winning environmental activist? So, little tips, trinkets, and stuff. Oh yeah, recently this was in the news with NASA setting up a craft to circle around the moon because the United States, with the good old aid of NASA astronauts, is going to have some people be part of the moon. So that's interesting. So the United States estimate the world population has exceeded 8 billion people. Wow. So this is the current news. This was recently, or what I heard today. This one, I am not sure. Okay, what is it? At least 6 people are killed and 81 others injured in the bombing in Istanbul, Turkey. And in rugby union, the Rugby World Cup concludes with the New Zealand defeating England in the final. Which, yeah, the World Cup in Qatar this winter season, that's coming up soon, so that's something. And you have ongoing stuff like Mashra amid protests, Russian invasion of Ukraine, and recent deaths from Leonard Franke in Barker, John Connaughton, Carl Hubbard, Willie Donald, Jeff Coltrane. So I figured with the news, I'm actually curious about a bomb in Istanbul, Turkey. How's this related? 2022. Okay. So this is actually a current event. Wow. But on today, there's also other significant things that happened November the 17th. Like from 1558, Elizabeth I became Queen of England and of Ireland, marking the beginning of the Elizabethan era. So you pretty much have that. Which I do have. Huh. Actually curious. Okay, so it's around like the late 1400s, like around it was it 1480, 1490. For some reason I'm thinking like 1492, when Christopher Columbus set foot in the Caribbean, notifying that there's a new continent area that is part of the New World, not the Old World. So Elizabeth I, if Jamestown was created around like what, early 1600s, I keep on thinking about 1619, then it would have been around her time that the company that created Jamestown existed, the first English colony. But I'm actually not sure. Actually, I want to look a bit more about when she reigned and stuff. Okay, 1603. Because I do know she had a role to play when it comes to the rise of companies to overshare some territories around trade ports around the world. But I do wonder if she actually was in charge with the formation of the British, was it British West Indies? Because ever since I started learning about India, it made me also get confused with the difference between two of the British companies from the West Indies and the East Indies. But that is something for another time. But yeah. Kingdom, France. You have a lot of things that comes from her legacy. Now let me actually see. East Indian Company. Yeah, the East Indian Company was formed to trade in the Indian Ocean region and China, and received a charter from Queen Elizabeth on 31st December 1600. For a period of 15 years, the company was awarded a monopoly on English trade with all countries east of the Cape of Good Hope and west of the Straits of Magellan. Sir James Lancaster commanded the first expedition in 1601. The company eventually controlled half of the world trade and substantially territory in India in the 8th and 19th centuries. This explains it further, but around the time when the East Indian Company in India was forming, you also had France, the Dutch, and the sphere of influence of Spain with the Spanish to come. That's probably what they also put with the Spanish Armada, but that has to follow along with how England had to deal with the Spanish when it came to, what is it? The death of Elizabeth's family members. I'm not quite sure if it was the sister or not that was executed, which led to a war. Which, interesting enough, with the Spanish Armada, it was defeated, and the English won that conflict. But yeah, anywho, that's something I could probably look at. The difference between the West and the East Indian Company and the formation of it. Okay, yeah, out of the West, East. What the hell? Huh. Funny enough, when I actually looked at specifically the West Indian Company, came with this. Wicco is a formerly a private company in the United States Virgin Islands, now owned by the Public Finance Authority of the USVI. It was founded in 1912 in Denmark and operated for most of the history as a subsidiary of the East Asiatic Company. It was sold in 1993 to the government of the USVI. Now, know that it's an acronym for United States Virgin Island. Originally designed to manage coal bunkering, the company bought electricity services to the island in 1914. In 1936, the original president falls here when it comes to Denmark, saw tourism as another business venture and established the Medicine Donuts. Alright, you want to look. The mall has numerous tenants and services, including medical, business services, gifts, and souvenirs, along with jewelry, restaurants, apparel, sports, and car rentals. Okay, this actually brings more into it. Oh yeah, I forgot. Yeah, that was what happened in 1558. Elizabeth I became Queen of England, and then in 2009, on the same date, administrators of the University of East Anglia Climate Research Unit discovered that their servers have been hacked and thousands of emails and files on climate change has been stolen. Damn. Today's feature picture. Nina Simone. Yeah, this is pretty much this. Along with other things related here and more resources. So anywho, if it was confusing me looking at it, let me look at this. Okay, yeah. There's another one. But I think I should also remember the Dutch West Indian Company. Not for the English, but for the Dutch, which was also. Well, typically enough, a lot of things besides finding New York State and New York City. Yeah, damn. Oh shoot, I think something's up with my mouse. Let me see. I wonder if it's also having some problems whenever I move around. Alrighty, let me actually look at this. Okay, yeah. London along with. Ah, man, don't tell me. Okay. So looking through here when it comes to Jamestown, Virginia, it just says the settlement of the colony of Virginia was the first permanent English settlement in the Americas. Yes. And I'll follow from other things related to this. And yeah, it just gives a bit of a gist of it, but not much. When it comes to the prehistory of it, just the settlement. So here is the epiphany I had. I'm starting to realize how big the Dutch East Indian Company was through the formation of the United States. Definitely when it comes to colonial history in the Americas, but the thing with the Americas in colonial history is that frankly in the public school system they don't teach us jack shit, and when it comes to trying to be accurate it can fumble. What I mean by fumble is that they can certainly get certain timelines, dates, things wrong. Like the significance of the Dutch East India Company. Because from what I remember, it was the biggest accomplishment for it was the establishment of Jamestown, for example. Yet, one thing I obviously always have to remember is that, well, Jamestown was not the first, and neither was in the last, especially when it comes to this new world. Because when it comes to settlements, like understanding how Jamestown. Oh yeah, I also got that right. It was founded in, was it officially based on the Wikipedia article, 1605. When it came to the year 1619, I could guess that I got that date right was because of them importing African slaves from the was it transatlantic or is it just the Atlantic slave trade? And it's also when it came to the book with was it Project 1619 or 1619 Project. So yeah, that's why I sort of remember the name right. It's also around the time when they started doing tobacco, but early 1600s. Another date is coming up, 1632. But yeah, I digress as usual. But even so, when it came to Jamestown, that's what the Dutch East India Company has been taught, that this was a great accomplishment. Yet, they did a lot of things over its course. The company, its legacy, history before and afterwards, which I find it so fascinating understanding that because I get taught about certain things depending on, what public school system I was. It wasn't until later in life I started learning more. Which one thing I didn't know much when I started learning about Jamestown and when it comes to history is that we don't talk about much Roanoke versus me talking to other people from like Massachusetts, especially when it comes to people from New England. When I actually started talking to more people and seeing where they're coming from, and apparently they don't know much about Jamestown, but they certainly know a lot about the Roanoke colony and the Pilgrims, particularly when it comes to the interesting story of the first Thanksgiving, which, yeah, that is coming up. So, there's plenty of opportunities I could always talk about things. But, yeah. And me understanding the Dutch East India Company, I just had to think about how much work their legacy has contributed. That I'm even still learning more about it. Plus, it also has make me realize, okay, the importance of the Dutch throughout world history is a lot more significant than people give credit. Because, when it comes to world history, especially when it comes to geography, when it comes to world cultures and stuff, you learn about brief histories when it comes to the United States, the United Kingdom, or Great Britain, France, Germany, and nowadays Japan, China. But now when it comes to other countries, even ones that are part of the Western world, because that is the thing about what's it history. Almost every person in different parts of the world, different countries, nationalities, empires, they have their own history. So maybe the Dutch. Yeah, I'm actually thinking about probably the Dutch. That is something I want to also look at. But anywho, this is what is today's happening. Something I could just go through because this is today's news. And yeah, the 2022 Istanbul bombing. So, this document documents a current event. Information may change rapidly as the event progresses, and initial news reports may be unreliable. The latest updates to this article may not reflect the most current information. Feel free to improve this article or discuss changes on the talk page, but please note that the updates without valid and reliable references will be removed. November 2022. So, this is 13th November 2022. And yeah, this was recent. Right now I'm reading this. The date is the 16th of November 2022. And yeah, let's see what information I have. Okay. On 13 November 2022, a bomb exploded on Iqbal Avenue in the Boğaziçi district of Istanbul, Turkey at 4:20 p.m. local time. 6 people were killed and 81 others were injured. The bombing is regarded as a terrorist attack. The city experienced previous terrorist attacks during the late 20th and earlier 21st century by Kurdish separatists and Islamic insurgents. As Islamic State suicide bombing in the same district killed 4 people in 2016. No group has claimed responsibility, but Turkish authorities announced that Kurdish separatists were behind the attack. In blinking the Kurdish Workers' Party (PKK) and the Syrian Kurdish Democratic Union Party (PYD), the Turkey Interior Minister Suleyman Soylu announced the arrest of the bomber and 46 others. Turkey's PKK denied any role in the attack, as did the Syrian Democratic Forces (SDF), which accused the Turkish government of creating a pretext for a new ground attack on Syria. And oh boy. He's claiming 2 organizations when it comes to pretexting related to the war in Syria. That does bring into a question. But yeah. So you have the contents of background explosion victims, investigation afterwards, reaction, internal and international, along with everything. So what was the background? So the background here is during the late 20th and earlier 21st century, Islamists and Kurdish nationalists carried out many attacks in Istanbul, including a suicide bombing attack in March 2016 in Istiklal Avenue, which killed 5 people. Islamic State carried out a series of attacks during the mid-2010s. Insurgent activity reduced greatly during the late 2010s. An Iranian-backed anti-Israeli terror plot in Istanbul was foiled in June 2022, while the 2013 through 2015 ceasefire broke down following the Silampenia incident in 2015, resulting in a higher level of confrontation, higher death tolls, and several external operations on the part of the Turkish military. The intensity of the PKK-Turkey conflict did decrease in recent years. Since the 2016 Turkish coup attempt and the following purges, political discourse, media, public speech, as well as academic and judicial voices are heavily monitored, with nearly no possible opposition to government discourse. Turkey is heading toward its 2023 Turkish general election, which is expected to be a major challenge for the AKP, partly due to economic slowdown and very high inflation. In the past decade, Erdogan and the AKP government used anti-PKK security, martial rhetoric, or material rhetoric, martial material, and external operations to raise Turkish nationalist votes before elections. In between, security concerns and anti-terrorism laws have been used to repress and neutralize elected oppositions. Opposition HDP elected officials are systematically probed, arrested, dismissed based on tenuous accusation to then placed by AKP loyalists. So accusation by association due to alliances with HDP party officials and implant links to PKK terrorism is also used against other opposition leaders. CHP, mayor of Istanbul, Ekrem İmamoğlu, is indicated for such political alliances. The persecutor calling to evict him from politics in the 2023 Turkish general election. The votes of the persecuted HDP party, which is the pro-Kurdish party accused by Erdogan and the AKP to be linked with the PKK, are necessary to any opposition bloc wanting to conquer power. More recently, and since May 2022, Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his government have called for new external ground operations toward autonomous territories in Syria and ramped up attacks on the area. Now, this last paragraph is quite confusing when it comes to the backdrop of everything, because the backdrop of everything is referring to... Well, it started talking about terrorism, specifically when it comes to Islamists and Kurdish nationalists. Then when it comes to Erdogan, the government's relations to it, a lot of politicking, to the end paragraph that actually talks about Erdogan's military campaign into Syria, which people have said that he had a lot of prejudice in his own organization towards military operations, towards plans of actions. I'm going around when it comes to my words because I am awfully seeing that there's like 3 topics I just read when it came to the background and everything, but something to understand, and it's actually interesting because this is an updated thing, and yeah, this Wikipedia, I think next time if I do come back here, or really any Wikipedia, they can definitely change, is that, well, there's nobody who actually claim it, and it doesn't give you references of, besides pointing the finger statements of this group might have done anything. So the fact of having the background here, that one third of it is about politicking when it comes to current affairs and such, And even when it comes to the first few paragraphs that talks about the Islamists and Kurdish nationalists doing terrorist attacks over the 20th and 21st century, if it turns out that it was from another group, and I say group if they're pointing in the statement is like, okay, this is a group, then they would have to change significantly this background here. So this is like one of the few times I'm just going to have read this article, unless I could go back and look through previous wiki entries to see, okay, on what did they put down and particular why. It's something fascinating when it comes to comparing what is people's initial thinking and agreement time until later on. But the fact that they also put is saying that these two groups have put pretexts under the new government when it comes to the Syrian war, that's probably also a background you could also add to when it comes to the Syrian conflict and how a lot of things were going on there. Because yeah, the Syrian war has been going on for around a decade now, and it is a conflict that has a lot of history within that decade, similar to the situation in modern day Iraq from 2003 on up. But yeah, that's pretty much the background of Paula. Now there's the explosion. The explosion occurred on Ika Avenue in Bukhara, in the European part of Istanbul. Alright, the bombing went off in front of the shopping store. According to Turkish news portal TV, the explosion was caused by the improvised explosive device containing TNT. The blast caused windows to break, and images circulating on social media showed people bleeding. Firefighters and ambulances rushed to the scene. The police set up a perimeter around the scene, around the bombing site, and banned people from going to Ika Avenue and the Tekizim Square. Victims. 6 people were killed and at least 81 others were injured from the explosion. The dead were also Turkish citizens identified as Yusuf Mehmet, a member of the Ministry of Family and Social Services, and his 90-year-old daughter, a teenage girl and her mother, and a married couple. Of the 81 treated in the hospital, 39 were released in the same day and 5 were being treated in intensive care. On the 15th November, 23 were still treated in a hospital. Now you also have the investigation. Open an investigation on the attack and persecutors. Okay, with the Justice Ministry, Minister of the Interior and such. Alright. And then when it comes to human rights. Alright, now you have the aftermath. Around an hour after the explosion took place, a broadcast ban was issued by the Istanbul Criminal Court for all visual and audible news and social networking sites related to the incident. Only interviews with government officials are allowed to be reported. Alrighty. Istanbul's anti-terrorist office decided to suspend the rights of defense and suspect, but also the internet users who have been sharing negative information on the attack on social networks. And, they also put, in quotes, negative information. You also have the reactions, you have the international community that talks about it and such. And, what they have here is the 2003 Istanbul attacks, 2001 Istanbul suicide bombing, March 2010 Istanbul bombing, and Neve Charlotte synagogue massacre. And I wonder if they're going to have more resources to follow, especially when it comes to people they put down as the perpetrators of this terrorist act. But anyway, it is time. So, as usual, aloha.